The story began with a normal trip from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on a red-eye flight. On March 8, 2014, 42 minutes after midnight, a Boeing 777 plane with the registration number MH370 took off into the moonlit night and went northeast towards the South China Sea. Farik Hamid was the plane's first officer. He was 27 years old and needed just one more training trip to get his full license. At 53, the pilot in charge, Zahri Ahmad Shah, was one of the most experienced and well-known pilots for Malaysia Airlines. They were in charge of 10 flight attendants from Malaysia, who took care of 227 people. Most of the people on board were Chinese. There were also 38 Malaysians and people from Indonesia, Australia, India, France, the United States, Iran, Ukraine, Canada, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Russia, and Taiwan. The first 40 minutes of the trip went without a hitch. At 1:19 a.m., MH370 was almost out of Malaysian airspace. Malaysian Air Traffic Control asked the plane to go to Ho Chi Minh City over the radio. "Good night, Zahari." Zahari answered, "Malaysian 370. He didn't say the number again, but it wasn't unusual. No one had any more news from the plane after that. Zahari never talked to the Vietnamese people who were in charge of him. As soon as MH370 crossed into Vietnamese airspace, it disappeared from the radar. No matter how hard people tried, they couldn't get there. Commercial planes are supposed to always be available, known and trackable, but MH370 could not be found. A new Netflix film about the absence says that what happened next was that Malaysian controllers and the airline didn't know what to do for a long time. As the government tried to find the plane, loved ones in Beijing waited for a flight that never came. Obsession, because the disappearance captivated people all over the world and made them think about how to solve a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. Next of kin went through hours, days, weeks, months, and even years of searching and not finding answers. Aviation experts, engineers, data scientists, writers, fans, and others spent years trying to figure out what happened to MH370 by trying to put together confusing pieces of evidence into a puzzle. That answer is still hard to find. "It's the greatest aviation mystery of all time," said MH370, the plane that disappeared director Louis Malkinson. "In this world, we have cell phones, radar, satellites, and tracking. So it's hard to believe that almost 9 years later, we still don't have much." With clues found in the weeks and years after the disappearance, the 3-part Netflix series tries to put together a schedule. The Malaysian Air Force's main radar, which is a traditional radar that pings objects in the sky, showed that after MH370 flew into Vietnamese airspace, it quickly turned left and flew back over the Malay Peninsula in a southwestern direction. It turned around Penang, flew up the Malacca Strait to the northwest, and then went out into the Andaman Sea, where radar lost track of it. But for the next 6 hours, MH370 kept in constant touch with a geostationary satellite in the Indian Ocean that was run by the London-based company Inmarsat. According to data from these 7 electronic blips, MH370 turned south once it reached the Andaman Sea, flew straight for hours until it ran out of fuel, and then crashed into the southern Indian Ocean, somewhere between southwestern Australia and Antarctica. Whoever was flying the plane, most likely Zahari, who had the skills to do this but no reason to do it, probably let the cabin's pressure go down early on, killing everyone on board hours before MH370 crashed into the sea. At least, that's the official story, which is supported by the independent group, a group of aviation experts and scientists, and by Australian investigators who spent years looking for MH370 in a remote part of the Indian Ocean without success. It's the one that American flight writer William Langewish argued for in a 2019 article in The Atlantic. He said that the corrupt and secretive Malaysian government knew more about Zahari's personal life than it let on. The official Malaysian accident report, which came out in July 2018, didn't come to any clear conclusions and didn't rule out unlawful interference by a third party. It also supported the fact that pieces of MH370 have been found near the coasts of Reunion, Madagascar, and Mozambique. In the first episode of the series, The Pilot, we learn that Zahari is planning to kill a lot of people and then kill himself. This is shown by the fact that his home flight simulator shows a path that is very different from what the radar and satellite data show. But in the next cases, which are separated by theories, you'll hear competing theories that say proof that you've heard so far isn't conclusive, was misinterpreted, or was made up. The second episode, The Hijack, talks about a theory put forward by American aviation journalist and lifelong MH370 fan Jeff Weiss. He says that Russian agents took over MH370 through the plane's electronic bay, which can be reached through a hatch in the first-class cabin, to take attention away from the conflict in Crimea. This would leave out the satellite data, which Weiss said had been tampered with as a distraction. In the third film, The Intercept, French writer Florence Deschangy, who covers Southeast Asia for Le Monde, says that she thinks the U.S. military shot down the plane over the South China Sea so that the mysterious cargo wouldn't get to China. This means that the radar reports and satellite data that Inmarsat, a company that works with governments, gave were made up to hide the truth. Both ideas assume that trash that washes up on the shore was either misplaced or put there. French investigator Ghislaine Rotrelos, whose wife Lawrence, 17-year-old son Hadrien, and 13-year-old daughter Ambre died on MH370, has a similar point of view. At the time, Rotrelos' case in France was the only investigation into the missing flight that was still going on. In the last two shows, they try to walk a fine line between asking questions and making up a plot. Both Wise and Deschangy admit that their ideas seem crazy to them. When asked why he chose to go down the rabbit hole of doubt and study or throw out a lot of data, Malkinson said that those who lost someone on MH370 and those who wanted to find answers were fixated on the question. She said that the show was not just about what happened. It was about the people who couldn't stop thinking about this for 9 years. It's about how this kind of secret affects the people who are involved in it. In fact, the series is more like a slow-moving puzzle of facts, assumptions, blanks, and pain than a game of evidence-based Tetris. The radar sighting, the Inmarsat data, the Russian military shooting down another Malaysian Airlines flight over Ukraine in July 2014, the discovery of the wing flap on Reunion, and the discovery of Zahari's flight simulator all happen about 3 hours apart. The feeling is more of confusion, like you're trying too hard to make sense of the map. Malkinson said, "These are people who have been part of the story since the beginning, and they are questioning what has been called the official story. They've written a lot about it and done a lot of research. They may connect the dots in a way that not everyone agrees with, but they've put in a lot of time and effort, and they're asking questions that haven't always been answered." When asked which situation she thought was most likely, she said the plane is most likely in the southern Indian Ocean. But we don't know why or how it got there. I don't know what happened because there are still a lot of questions that haven't been answered. She said, "I know that some of the theories are more fanciful than others, but what's most important to me is that the next of kin still don't have all the answers and that this mystery hasn't been solved." In addition to the loss, the puzzle in the series shows how painful it is for the people who were close to those who died. These people come from 7 different countries. Some people went into the streets to protest the slow reaction of the Malaysian government. Others tried to find peace in the trash that was all over the beaches of Madagascar. Quite a few people stay in touch with each other. The heart of the series for me has always been the next of kin, Malkinson said. Even trying to understand the complicated pain of ambiguous loss is a trauma. It's hard to understand, not knowing. The people we've talked to say their biggest fear is that people will forget about this and will just be a sad thing that happened. And they'll have to move on, she said. In 2017, the search for MH370 in the dangerous areas of the southern Indian Ocean was stopped by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau. It was never likely that they would be able to do what they set out to do. It was a huge area with no known end. It was far away and often hit by storms. And it has underwater caves as big as the Grand Canyon. Still, Malkinson said that he hoped the search would be done again one day, so that there would be closure, proof, and most importantly, next of kin. I don't think we can live in a world where a 777 has gone missing, which is sad, and we have to move on. That shouldn't happen. Thanks for watching this video.